in the chat session, you can put questions. We'll get to that near the end, or there'll be some discussion times where I'd love to hear back from you. But for now, and let me just do a quick check to make sure if I've gone to the next slide that we're working here. Yep, looks like it. So today we wanted to have a few goals. So really, I think part of it is in adapting your sales team and your sales systems is resetting your expectations for how this new world is, and including how long it might take to go back to a normal, which is not what we used to have. Taking a lot of the risk out of building a sales team that can succeed, and especially setting up your outbound or sales development teams for success. So I'm sure we have a bunch of people on here who have sales development teams or want to build them. So some of the things we'll talk about would be how a private equity fund triples valuations of companies, how to build your first sales team if you're new here. And I'm guessing that we probably have some people that are really new and maybe don't have a sales team at all and or want to build one. And we might have a few corporate people as well. So we'll touch on both of those. Sales leadership, revenue leadership, renailing your niche, because that's really a fundamental part of adapting to survive here and thrive in the COVID situation, and a sales development operating system. Now, if you didn't catch, I did a short keynote or session yesterday, and one of the things, just fun fact I mentioned, and that is we have a large family, 9 kids. A lot of what I do is motivated by having a big family, right? So I have to make more money. I have to do it in less time as well, because family is very important. I work about 20 hours a week, sometimes less, sometimes more. And, I had 0 kids. I got married 9 years ago. We just had our 9th anniversary. So I went from 0 to 9 kids. Actually, it's about 6 years because the youngest is 3 years old. But this is really my motivation and why I have to survive and thrive as well, just like everyone else with our business. Now, I'm also co-CEO of a company called PredictableRevenue.com. Right? It's about a $5 million business with 55 people, mostly in North America. I'm the lone person outside of North America. And a lot of what I'm sharing with you are things that we've actually done ourselves or are doing. Now, I think you got to keep in mind, not a shocker, this is the year of unpredictability. But with great disruption and great challenge comes great opportunity. And there's really never been a time like this. This is the greatest kind of spurt of entrepreneurial creation or just like personal creation ever for the world. Right? Everything is restructuring and not going away. It's like the forest fire that sometimes has to burn down the forest for the new growth to come in. And that's really what's happening in a lot of industries. So I would highly encourage you again to think of this as an opportunity to invest in yourself or your team or your business. And once you get through, some of you are in a year of hell. Some of you are doing better than before. Some it doesn't really affect. And a lot of you, we say in a year of hell. And if you can think of this as you want to be in a better place in a year or two, once this settles out, than you are today. So let's talk about revenue leadership first, because I think this is really my mindset. I'm just going to do a quick, if there's any, I got to go back and forth, any audio or video issues, just throw something in the chat. Maybe Nina, if you can also keep an eye on it. So we're in this new world. All right. And if any of you have a sales team, if you've done forecasting, chances are forecasting is probably pointless at this point. Maybe scenario planning is more useful, because you can't do forecasting until you actually have some consistency, some regularity, or some predictability with how your lead generation and sales and customers and attrition are working. All right, this might go on for another 1 or 2 years. Like, no one knows. It really is going to be unpredictable. It's not going to be a few months, right? Things will open and then there'll be spikes and back and forth, and we don't know. There's going to be, we know then there'll be no surprise when there's more surprises, but we just don't know what they are when they'll happen. Recession is likely, big recession likely, right? In the United States alone, 10 or 20 million filed unemployment, right? There's a lot of governments, they're still propping up the jobs and salaries of people. And I know in Canada, it's been going on for 3 months, it's gonna go on for 3 more months. We'll see in the States. Once that stops, we'll see. Obviously, a lot of industries have already been just trashed. Some are actually doing better, but we haven't even really seen the full brunt of what's happening here. We're at the very early stages. And ultimately, you have to think about how do you adapt to this new world rather than try to hope that it's going to go back to the way it was, right? Because it's not going to. You can't expect the world to go back to adapt to the way that you built your team and your model and your messaging last year. It's just not going to happen. So, for example, whatever your old quotas and goals for your sales team are, if you might have to throw them away. If more than 30% of your team is missing them, even today in the COVID, you have to either start over or recreate them. You might need to start looking at it on a weekly basis. If you have a lot of change up and down, and you're really struggling, you might have to look at it weekly. What did we accomplish last week? What can we accomplish next week? How do we tie our comp to next week's goals or maybe the next month? If you have a little bit of settling out that's happened, maybe you look at it on a monthly basis. But some of you can stick to the old quotas from last year. A lot of you might need to kind of completely revisit them. And I'll say some of you, if your businesses are doing even better than they were, you might need to increase them. But you're going to have to be open to embracing the change and giving up your old expectations and entitlement of where you thought you were going to be by the end of the year. Virtual selling, right? This is going to be permanent in some form. Face-to-face will return someday, but it's going to be a long time and in much smaller doses than before, or in a different way, where maybe, if you have door-to-door salespeople, right, they have the different safety mechanisms. So people can't see their faces if they have masks. I mean, it's going to be different. It's going to be less and different. All salespeople are going to have to be capable of virtual selling in some way, whether that's 10% of their job or 90% or 100%. Right? And there's lots of pros and cons of virtual selling. Yes, for enterprise selling, when you can get together in person, especially in Europe, which people really still wanted a lot more in-person meetings. Still true of the States, but even more so in Europe. People are just going to have to get used to it. And a lot of the customers aren't going to want you to visit, right? Or only very specific situations. And you save a lot of time that way. The problem is you don't get that in-person experience, like that just extra bonding, but you get extra time. Same thing with remote sales management. That's here to stay for a long time, right? And teams will get together in person. Again, it'll just be less, it'll be different, maybe less common. This, of course, is different for every company. And a lot of companies are going to stay virtual. So all salespeople need to be capable of working remotely. Onboarding is going to be trickier for most businesses. And there's going to be a lot of pros and cons, again, of managing salespeople remotely. So don't focus just on the problems of having, if your business is slower, if you have salespeople, I'm sure some of you don't, maybe you are the salesperson, but don't focus on the problems of what you've got, what you had, and what's not working. Focus on the opportunity. Right? There's a lot of advantages to whatever situation you're in. Sometimes you have to be forced to recreate what you're doing, to embrace that change in order to really make it happen and to grow. And speaking from experience, I still remember this moment 9 years ago-ish, when I had gotten married and had a couple of kids from my wife's first marriage and a baby on the way. And I remember this, I need to make more money to support a family. And it really lit a fire under my butt to focus on my own niche and grow my business and grow my income by a lot, because I had to, right? So this is a case where a lot of companies and people have to recreate yourselves because you don't have an option. So if you can embrace that, you're going to be way ahead of the game when this flattens out. All right. Now, for those of you who don't have a sales team, or maybe you're the one person and you're kind of thinking about it this year. So let's say your product is getting to market. I just want to review this. This is actually out of the From Impossible to Inevitable book. The newest one that I came out with Jason Lemkin, an update last year. So I think the most important thing is the CEO or founders are selling, right? So anyone who's involved in creating a product, launching a product, you need to be involved in selling that. Now, if you're doing B2C, that might look more like marketing language funnels, and you're just talking to customers, talking to consumers. In business to business, you actually should be involved in sales cycles. But first is you need to do that, because if you don't do it, you won't have the knowledge and the experience and the kind of that pattern recognition to not only hire the right people or help them take it over, but if someone takes over sales and it's not working, then you won't know how to fix it. I made that mistake I don't know, like 20 years ago when I had a business that failed because I didn't know sales because I wasn't doing the selling. Often that CEO, the first sales hire you should make, if you haven't, especially if you haven't done this before, is a junior salesperson, often called an SDR, sales development rep, that might be handling inbound leads if you've got them, or doing outbound prospecting if you need that. Basically, they're doing is all the junior work that you as the C-level salesperson, right, the CEO who's selling, is really not worth your time. And so they're supporting you for a few months to get that system down. And then you're in a better place to hire a senior salesperson, whether you promote that junior person first to closing, or you can hire a senior salesperson from someplace else. The common mistake with the problem is if you're a CEO and the first person you hire is in sales, so often that fails. Because first, you don't know how to hire the right person. Salespeople are good at selling themselves. So you make a mishire, or even if you hire a good person, your expectations are way out of whack. You don't appreciate kind of like the founder magic you've got. So anyway, it's just a lot less risky to hire a junior person first. Then you hire a senior person or promote them. So phase 2 is you've got usually a senior person selling, 1 or 2, plus a junior person. Then you hire another one of each. You end up with two junior salespeople, like those SDRs. Again, whether they're doing inbound or outbound, a lot of that depends on your business. And 2 senior salespeople before you hire like a senior sales leader. Because that senior sales leader, really, they're much more effective and more cost effective if there's already something there working that they can grow. And when the CEO is really managing the sales team in the early days, even if it feels like it takes longer, what you learn is invaluable towards making it successful in the future. So that's really when you're starting out. For other companies, if you've got some traction already, and this is from Jason Lemkin, again, out of that From Impossible to Inevitable book, but kind of thinking about what kind of person do you need at what stages? And sometimes people can do a couple stages, but it's not about do you need to change people out every level. It's really what you need is maybe different. Like if you're hiring someone who built the sales team at Oracle or some big company near you, they're not going to be a good fit for usually an early startup. So in the early days, the evangelist, it actually might be the CEO, a founder who's just inspiring people, and people buy because really they're inspired in some way. And as you get to, $1 million in revenue or a couple million, then you need, how do we make this more repeatable? So you need someone who has more of a process head, like that VP of sales or sales leader or revenue leader. You can kind of look at the numbers, look at the patterns, and how do you do this again and again and again? After 10 million or so, you just got to, how do you start to scale? You've got enough there. Maybe that's the time you raise money, start hiring more, invest bigger, because you're just trying to grow it. You've got it repeatable. You just want to grow it, add fuel to the fire. And as you get really big, you start to kind of manage all through the metrics. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need this exact person. It's just being thoughtful about what kind of person do you need where you are, and not trying to hire people just because they worked at a big name company. And it's a recipe for disaster. You do need to hire a sales leader, right? You should, if you're someone like, and this is true of any other executive function, whoever you're trying to hire, you should learn from them. If you're hiring a senior person, if you're not learning from them, there's a problem, right? You see, they'll come in, they'll help upgrade the talent, right? You'll see results that will improve quickly within one sales cycle. So that might be revenue. Again, in B2B, maybe it's pipeline, maybe it's other aspects. So what you can, that's tangible progress that you're building. They're building confidence. You're seeing confidence in them because you can see the differences they're making, whatever that means. I mentioned don't be blinded by their resume. Just because they worked at a fancy company doesn't mean they're a good fit for you. And this is again from the VP of sales who created this main sales team to echo sign LinkedIn. Is if you have a VP of sales coming in or a sales leader, here are some of the things they would start with, right? How can you drive deal sizes up as quickly as possible? In a consumer world, that might look like distribution partners. If you're bringing salespeople in, right? Again, you're seeing them perform quickly. Doesn't mean it may or may not be closing deals, but they're creating tangible progress, tangible value within 30 days. It shouldn't take 3 months. If someone's there for 3 months and you're still like, I'm not sure what they're doing, that's a problem. Right? Just being honest and transparent from the salespeople up and senior people down, right? And senior people set the tone there. Great teams stay together means if you hire people from a great team, they'll probably bring over other people from a great team. And you want inbound lead generation and outbound lead generation. Now, you probably need to focus on one first, get that working before you add in the second, because they both take a lot of work and time. But you, if anyone here thinks, oh, I just want to build a product that's product-led and it's a great product, everyone's just going to come in and buy it, that's a great dream, pretty rare. There's reasons why even companies like Facebook and Google have outbound prospecting teams. So again, if you're B2C, you can actually use outbound prospecting for distributors and partners or media marketing opportunities. So inbound and outbound, whichever one you start with, kind of depend on where you are. Now, there's been a lot of talk over the years around conflicts between the sales team and marketing team. Now, I realize a lot of you aren't going to have sales team leaders and marketing team leaders, but for the ones that do, really you need first identify who is the revenue leader. Who's that one person who's the revenue leader? Oftentimes it's the CEO or maybe a general manager. So if you have a head of sales, head of marketing, the problem is if you have a CEO, they can be the revenue leader, but they often delegate too much or abdicate too much of the responsibility to the sales and marketing heads, kind of figure how they're going to work together. So they typically need to be more hands-on with ensuring that the metrics and the communication and coordination is in sync. More common today is having a VP of revenue or a chief revenue officer where there really is one person in charge of sales and marketing. It's really up to you, but you need one person who can ensure that sales and marketing and whatever is touching revenue is working together rather than apart. Also, especially in B2B, you need SDR, BDR teams to bridge that gap. So if marketing is generating leads or there's word of mouth leads, 9 times out of 10, you need humans to filter through those leads and ensure that they're all getting fast follow-up and the right ones are going to the sales team. If you are doing outbound prospecting, you've got outbound SDRs, right? So it's part of that is that marketing should be measured on things that sales cares about. Sales doesn't care about new leads created or MQLs, marketing qualified leads. Salespeople don't care about that. What they care about would be whether you call it a sales accepted lead or sales qualified opportunity. There's a lot of terms for, I'm a salesperson, I've got an appointment, and I've accepted it as kind of fits my criteria. Right? That's really what marketing should be measured on. That way, sales and marketing care about the same things. So just a quick sort of check, right? Discussion, and I'd love to hear it in the chat. Was there something here that resonated with you, right? We covered a lot of territory, things that could apply sometimes just to small companies or startups, sometimes bigger ones. So if there's one thing here that really resonated, what was that? Because if you take one thing from it, then it's a win. Is there something here you're like, you realize you're resisting? Whether it's the fact that face-to-face is going to be on its way to a smaller portion of what your sales team can do permanently, or remote salespeople? Is it the throwing out quotas, having to change them, having to reset your goals for this year, maybe in a significant way? It's hard to tell if you have a board, it's hard to go to the board and say, we have to throw away our old goals for this year, even if they understand there's a pandemic. When you're looking at the leadership you've got, do you have the right leadership? If you need leadership, how are you going to find it? What's the right fit? And if you have a marketing person, what are they measured on? Are they really working in hand with this, if you have a head of sales or head of revenue? Let's see if I'm just going to check the chat here for a moment. Yeah, I'd love for someone here. What was like one of the things that most resonated with you? And then I'll go back. I'll come back and check in a second. So that's the first, that revenue leadership section. If your mindset and your senior team is on board, that will make everything else easier. If you're the kind of like that team culture, whether it's you're the only person because you're just the one person operation, or whether you've got some senior people, if you don't have agreement with kind of like where you want to get to, what's happening, then everything else is going to be harder. All right, sales team design. So I'm going to go back to SageMount is a $3 billion investor. And I've taken a lot of the ideas from the Predictible Revenue book and the From Impossible to Inevitable book, and kind of how do they create this playbook to reignite growth, right? Their goal is to invest in a company and triple that company's valuation in 3 years. So I shared this yesterday with a short talk. I'm going to spend some extra time on some parts of this, right? Slowing down to systematize really just means focus on things too that are important but not urgent. Like if you're spending all your time fighting fires, you also though need to spend some time on how to prevent fires from starting in the first place. How can you discover and create that repeatability in your lead generation, sales, and customer success? So, and that takes things like analysis and intuition and interviews and discussion, right? It's often like a slow and often tedious process to find that repeatable revenue model. Specialize in sales, which is what kinds of sales roles do you need, which we'll do that next. Renailing a niche, really renailing, and then creating a predictable pipeline. But this topic on sales specialization. Now, someone asked me, what's one of the most controversial ideas in predictable revenue? And it's like, well, actually, it's sales specialization, because there's still so many companies and people who think that salespeople should do all their own prospecting. And they shouldn't. There's no team, there's no coach that tells everyone on their team that everyone should attack and defend. Right? That's a recipe for failure. They've got attackers, midfield defenders, and goalies. Right? And that's the way that your sales team needs to follow in terms of specializing what functions do they need to do and who's going to do them. Right? And these are these 4 core roles. Now, for you, the number of roles might be different. If you don't have any inbound leads, this first one, which is lead response, is going to be irrelevant. If you are in a consumer model and you're not ready, or a very small business model, and you're not ready to go after kind of partnerships, then you won't need outbound prospecting. But most companies at some point, and let's call product companies or SaaS companies, have these 4 roles or more. So inbound lead response, again, junior, often called the LDR, lead development rep, maybe an MDR, market development rep. Let's see if I can do my little laser, right? So they're responding to all those inbound leads coming from marketing, word of mouth, or coming into your website. They're filtering them, which ones are real, which ones are trash, which ones are current customers. And they're setting appointments, or at least connecting the best leads or the right leads with your salespeople or support teams or wherever they need to go, kind of routing them. Right? So they're passing the best leads to the right leads to the new business salespeople who are signing new customers. And then once those customers are signed, they go to the post-sale teams, usually called customer success, sometimes account management. And of course, you can have onboarding, renewals, professional services. You can have a lot of teams after a customer signs up. But the idea is the people taking care of the customers, for the most part, are specialists in that, not having salespeople having to juggle both signing customers and taking care of current ones. Again, except for if a salesperson has a small number of special customers, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, where they just build such a relationship and they're going to take care of them as well. But otherwise, most of it should be done by other teams. And the last one, outbound prospecting, really needs to be its own function if you wanted to do it well. Right? They need dedicated time. They need to do the bulk of prospecting if that fits your model. So salespeople should prospect a little bit, but maybe only to 10 or 20 or 30 key accounts or partners. And the rest of the prospecting should be done by dedicated outbound prospectors. So just a couple facts. If you've got SDRs already, and I know a lot of you probably don't, some of you do, make sure those SDRs, unless you only have one SDR doing everything, they need to be split. The prospectors need to just do prospecting, right? The inbound SDRs, let's call them LDRs, those lead development reps getting marketing leads, right? They can handle all those marketing leads and then do other stuff like outbound. But the outbound prospectors can't do outbound and then switch to inbound. It just doesn't mix. And we'll spend some more time on that later. Also, again, I mentioned splitting account management or customer success from the closing or signing new customers, right? The more you specialize, the better typically. is what this does is it creates insights across how different functions are working or not, scalability, and a talent garden to grow your talent up through the ranks. And you're going to struggle without it. Now, if you are one person, we'll get to that as well, because I know a lot of you are going to be small. You're not going to have 10 salespeople, but you only need 2 people to start specializing. So one is a junior person, one is a senior person. Often when you create a new role, it can take 6 months to kind of define it, staff it, and actually make it work consistently well. And if you can, when you do something new, start with 2. It just means you've got 2 people on board. They can have a buddy system to help each other. And you can tell if things are working or not. You can kind of get a better sense of, is it the system and the process, or is it the people? Common ratio samples. If you have inbound leads for every about 400 that a human needs to review, you need 1 full-time LDR, right, lead development rep. And for an outbound SDR prospector, they can support typically like 1 to 3 or 4 salespeople. Right? If they support more than that, they start to get too scattered. So a little bit of time again for discussion or consideration. What role are you most urgently missing today? And sorry, actually, one thing I left out is if you are a single person shop, like you might be the CEO or you're one salesperson, the way to start with specialization is to focus your time. That means you might block out time to prospect 2 hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Or if you aren't getting to customer success, right, block out time. But you got to block out your time. You specialize your calendar. This really is about focus, doing fewer things better, just like a sports team. And in fact, there's an interview and a guy had a great suggestion, which was even sales management. Like it's ridiculous to think a VP of sales is going to be able to do everything and be the best at everything. Call coaching, email editing, forecasting, CRM changes, Like really where you need to go is how championship teams are run, where they have multiple coaches, all specialists in their area, like for offense, defense, and so on, fitness. So you'd have to have separate coaches and specialists, whether they're in your company or not, for call coaching, email coaching, I don't know, time management, CRM changes, and whatever is key to you, because one person just can't be an expert at everything. It's impossible. So bringing it back, what role are you most urgently missing today or function? Is it the prospecting? Is it the customer success? So if you think about by the end of this year, what would your sales team have to look like? What do you want it to look like? Does it have those 4 roles? Are there more? Are there less? All right. What would happen then if you started with next month? What's the first couple changes or first change you would start to make to head in that direction? How would this change your roles in hiring in terms of your priorities and who you need to hire next? Did you think you needed a senior salesperson, but really you need a junior? One of the great things, there's so much talent now available. But one great thing about the specialization approach is that talent garden, where you can bring in people who have great values and great ambition and interest and maybe not much experience, and they're not as expensive, but they can grow through the ranks and become incredible employees, whether they stay in sales or whether they go off to any other function you've got, because these junior sales roles are a fantastic gardening grounds for people who could be good at anything in the company, whether it's product, marketing, partnerships, business development, support, success, coding, because they've been talking to customers so much. I'm going to go back here and check. There we go. The slide got out of order, right? What happens if you're too small? Mention that. You focus the time on your calendar. And some people, if you've been doing this a while, I said a little more senior, you might think, well, if I have customers being passed from person to person, right? Lead development rep to salesperson to customer success, isn't that going to hurt the relationship? And in fact, if you do this the right way with simple handoffs, your service gets better, because no matter where that customer is, they've got someone who's really like dedicated to making things work for them. When a salesperson does everything and they're juggling prospecting, inbound leads, closing, and customers, they're doing a lot of things, some things well, and a lot of things a lot of customers are ignoring. All right, let's talk about renailing your niche, right? This is really about getting lead generation popping again. And I think this idea of lead generation, I'm kind of combining lead generation and renailing a niche, because if your lead generation if you have lead generation, but if it's fallen off, if it's still struggling, the first step towards fixing it is renailing your niche. But again, the most important thing is to understand there's 3 types of leads. It's seeds, nets, and spears. And what these are really, seeds are the word of mouth. It's friends, family, networks, customer referrals. Okay, the best kinds of leads, but hard to grow. So each of these has pros and cons. With nets, that's marketing, right? Casting a wide net. It's a one-to-many broadcast. Great news is you can get leads from putting assets out there and people just come in, but you tend to get a lot of leads, of which a few are a good fit. And spears are the last one, outbound prospecting, outbound business development, whether you're using a targeted list, and there's usually a human involved to go out and get meetings with either customers or partners or marketing opportunities. So these 3 types are important because they're all important. In every business at some point has all 3 or should have all 3, but they're different. The metrics are different. The processes are different. The sales cycles can be different. The deal sizes can be different. The way they fit into your CRM can be different. So what you can't do, don't treat all leads are the same. Like a lead is not a lead is not a lead. And the goal with whatever you're doing here, the goal is to create predictability. And the goal to start is to know where are your customers coming from? Like, do you know, and again, this might have changed, like where are your customers coming from? How well do you know your lead sources of what does and doesn't close? Really, a lead source too is not a lead type. A lead source is, how did someone find out about you? Did a friend tell them? Did they read a book? Did they see a video? Was it a webinar? And that's different than lead type. A lead type is, how do they register with you? So let's say a webinar might be, let's say someone saw on LinkedIn that you're doing a webinar, right? And they registered for the webinar. So in your marketing reports, often it'll say we had 1,000 leads and 500 came from webinars. Yeah, but actually, how many of those people from webinars, the webinar is how they registered, but how many people found out about the webinar from LinkedIn versus friends versus newsletter? That's really the difference between lead source and lead type. Or a demo, right? Your demos and contact me's are usually the best types of lead type, but it doesn't tell you where they found out about you, like how they find you out. So this usually means that you have to have the first person, especially in B2B, usually the first person who talks to the prospect usually has to ask them the question, how did you find out about us? But going back to the drawing board and really looking at where are your leads coming from and which ones close. So you can try to get a sense of how can you repeat those. That's step 1. It's usually you don't have a good handle on it, because then your goal is to create a funnel like this, now again, the marketing funnel would look different and the customer success funnel, receipts funnel would look different. This is an outbound funnel, right? Is you want the repeatability. And you're looking for where can we create repeatable lead generation success? Because lead generation is your lever to drive growth, right? You can have a great product, you can have great salespeople, great process, but if you don't have a way to generate predictable leads, you're going to struggle. So what you want is just some kind of funnel. And again, the outbound funnel looks different than the marketing funnel, than the seeds. So the spears, this is a spear funnel, looks different than nets, than seeds, and different metrics, different funnels, etc. Wherever you can find some repeatability, doesn't matter as long as you can find some repeatability. And this is what you want, where you can kind of measure it step by step by step. And it's never perfect. You're just trying to get a sense of some, again, predictability. But you're kind of looking at the different steps the leads take, conversion rates, and you have some sort of sense of metrics. Now, again, a lot of you, COVID might have thrown all your prior metrics out the window. So if you are seeing a lot of variation week to week, month to month, and you just don't really know what's happening, sometimes you just got to surf that wave and just continue to do your best and realize that, again, for a lot of companies and people, there's not going to be predictability this year. You're just going to have to keep doing your best week by week, month by month, and kind of looking for new opportunities, whether it's the type of customers, type of products, type of features, type of lead sources. And here's an example from Zora. right? So this is what you want. This is what you want. I mentioned nailing a niche. So Zora has had a predictable funnel where they have list building at the top, activity goals. Right? So, and everyone's is a bit different. So they have some list building here, and then how many dials and emails and LinkedIn goals per day. They want 16 Are We a Fit calls a month, and then 4 sales accepted opportunities per month. This is per prospector. 2 technical demos, which is pretty, for them, it's a pretty far down the road stage, and 1 closed customer per month, about $100,000 in annual recurring revenue. Right, that's what you want. Now, if you don't have that, and where you start would be renailing your niche, which is okay. Even a couple, if you had a business before, right, things have changed, right? Your ideal customers may be different. Their problems and pains could be different. The solutions they want could be different. All the noise could be different. So it really goes back to, okay, where are the customers that need you the most? Where can you be a big fish in a small pond and stand out, right? And small, it's not about being a small and thinking small. It's really about being focused. And it's easier to make the pond smaller than the fish bigger, to retarget and remessage, and to redo your model. Although some of you are having to redo your model too. And the place to start is who needs you the most versus when you are nice to have. In product world, here's an example of a nice to have. You have a demo. People show up. They're like, wow, cool demo. And you never hear from them again. Right? You're nice to have. People buy and need to have, especially now. And you need to be ready to justify this because people need to want to see more often than not, how is this going to save me money, make me money? How can you translate what you do into money as much as you can? So this really involves practicing and getting into the mind of the customer. What do they want? They don't care what you do. They only care about the result that you get for them. And to really dive into what are the results they want. Right, and I used this example yesterday. My daughter, Aurora, teenager. Hey, Dad, can you take me to donuts? No. Hey, Dad, when we've gone for donuts, like I'm going to treasure these memories from my life. Okay. Yes. All right. Speaking the customer's language. That's, you want to get out of your own thinking and into the customers. All right. That other example for a company targeting hospitals in the United States, who's in charge of receivables, changed to who handles patient cash, speaking the language of the customer. How do you do that? Right. This comes back to things to slow down, right, and systematize. So, I mean, the simplest way, executives should be getting on the phone to talk to prospects and customers. Someone asked me, hey, what should a VP of marketing do to renail their niche? Like, get on the phone with customers. Don't do online surveys. Don't, just start with, just go talk to customers or go listen to people talking to customers or prospects. Then after doing that, you might try testing out things like targeting campaigns or maybe a survey. But there's really no replacement for just talking to people who are your customers or should be. This might be, again, running different analyses of where your customers come from or target markets. Testing different ways you can test your hypotheses. And also intuition. Sometimes, like, there's a lot of people who are so focused on data-driven business. Yes, data can be useful sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Which don't let data in trying to get people. I know there's a lot of, I couldn't say how many, but there are people, and also very famous people. Like I remember Marissa Mayer from Google, who then ran Yahoo CEO, is famous for, show me the data, show me the data. And reading that, I'm like, you know what? She's just using, to me, she used data as a crutch because she didn't, my feeling was, and I know her very little through, but she didn't have confidence. Maybe it's possible she didn't have confidence in her own decisions. And she's basically letting the data make her decisions for her. And you can't always have that. When you do have it, it's great. But if you don't, you still need to be able to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and make a decision to move forward. And now this can take time, slowing down to do things that are important but not urgent. So, got some points here for discussion. Let's see what we got going on here. Okay, good. I'm just checking the chat also as well while you look at this. So do you believe you adapted your targeting messaging to the new situation? And it's fluid. You realize maybe you adapted it today, things might change tomorrow, and you got to redo it. Have revenue executives been talking to customers and prospects? I know for some of you, it's easier to code or to design from a laptop, and the idea of actually going out and talking to customers can be kind of intimidating and scary. I get that. I was an engineer and shy. It's a new habit you need to develop. So maybe if you have a team, if you have a partner, so like that's something we need to commit to, is talking to even 3 prospects this week, or whether they're current customers or new ones. Some of you, if you're targeting markets, you have to be aware of, some markets are still, like restaurants, who knows what's happening to restaurants, or travel, like a lot might be dead, who knows, we don't know. There's no way you just got to be ready to adapt week by week, day by day. Some of you might be targeting markets where it is kind of settled down, and you can have a little bit of planning exercises that make sense at this point. So ultimately, like going through this on the lead generation front, and remember, lead generation really is what drives growth, assuming you have a product that people will buy. What's that next step that you need to do? Is it the phone calls? Is it to go back and analyze where your current customers are from? You got to pick something, maybe one thing to start with. It's easy to create a list of 1,000 things you should do, but you got to pick what's the first thing to do. Because we're all in overwhelm, and it's so easy to get stuck, paralyzed, and do nothing because there's too many things we can do. I'm just going to check here Martin's chat note. You suggest to split the team and each member should focus on certain tasks. What are the signs that sales marketing functions aren't specializing enough? The same person is doing too many things. Now, going back to the sales specialization with people, if you have a team of a few salespeople, or we call them people touching customers, because some people maybe you call them salespeople, maybe not, and something's not working, right? Especially if there's 2 people on a team and it's not working. It's probably not the people. It might be. It's probably not the people. It's probably the environment, the situation, the scope of their job. Go back to the example of every sales manager always complained, hey, my salespeople don't prospect enough. Yeah, but if all sales managers complain about that, it's not the people, it's the system. So you've got to go back to, if you're struggling, there's no replacement for, if you have a team of salespeople and like you're trying to figure out how to split them, to go talk to them, see what's working, what's not, to involve them in that conversation or on how the teams should be run and what's not working, what is working, what should be done about it. I would just usually go back and talk to them. It doesn't happen enough. Everyone has to do multiple things. So you're trying to gauge is, at what point is it a problem? All right, so here's this last section about sales development operating system. Now, primarily, if you have an SDR team, like those junior salespeople, again, there's the LDRs, the inbound reps, outbound SDRs, sometimes called BDRs, of prospectors. So outbound sales development reps. They do a lot of the lead generation support for salespeople, right? And they can create a bridge to marketing and so much predictability. If there's any doubt about the worth of investment of SDRs, like you got to do them. The only question is, if your customers are only worth several $100s, usually humans probably don't make sense, except in special situations. If they're a few $1,000s in total value, which might be, let's call, 200 euros a month, ish, 100 to 300 euros a month, you're in this zone where it just depends. You have to test. You can't say that yes, you need humans, or no, you don't. A lot of that depends on the market and the effectiveness. Usually having humans involved in the early days, try things with them, try it without them, to test where do you need them, where may they make things valuable and work better, so that you have clarity to whether you should staff certain role, what it does, or you shouldn't. A lot of people are afraid of selling. That's where the word sales. Sales is life skill. And again, I encourage a lot of you who are new to sales to realize that you can't accomplish anything in life, whether starting a nonprofit, getting a career promotion, starting a company, building a successful team, money without learning how to sell yourself product or idea. Right? So sales is a life skill. I mean, some of the best salespeople in the world have been like Elon Musk or Mother Teresa. Sales doesn't have to mean manipulation. A lot of sales fulfills a really important function. They help customers make the right purchasing decisions. They help customers make decisions. A lot of customers aren't good at making decisions. A lot of, and bigger companies actually need help buying. It's really hard to buy and implement in a big company. So I'm going to go back to this outbound sales development operating system. So if you have some of these challenges, and let's say you've got an SDR team and they're not doing what you want, and this might have been before COVID, maybe it's now, right? They might have never hit target. They might have done well, then fallen off a cliff. Maybe you've got multiple people, they're all doing different things. You are getting appointments, but then you're not closing much, or they're small deals, right? So let's talk about some sample solutions for this. Now, I actually have a separate workshop. I just posted on LinkedIn. It's called Outbound Sales Mistakes That Even Smart Leaders Make. If you follow me on LinkedIn, if you go to my profile, and I'll put the profile in the chat. It's the last thing I posted, so you can go find it. But it's got even more in depth. This is like a few ideas from that workshop. Another issue is if the people on the teams are frustrated, right? They're not happy. So what do we do? First step, you have to make sure you totally separate those two jobs: inbound lead response and outbound prospecting, right? They look so similar, right? They're so different. The thing is, they look similar because on the surface, right? You have junior people, salespeople, who are using the phone, email, LinkedIn, whatever, to set appointments and qualify things and send the right people onto the sales team. But they're so different. The mindset's different. The metrics, the comp conversions and messaging, the way they use tools is all different, because one is very reactive and should be that inbound response role. One is very proactive. The cycle times are different. Deal sizes are different. They're completely different jobs with like a little bit of a surface that makes people think they're the same, right? So you have to protect and defend the time and focus of your outbound prospectors if you want them to be successful. If they are juggling inbound and outbound, I guarantee you it is a problem. It muddies the waters. It muddies their mindsets. It just doesn't work. So if you have two people, like if you have one person, of course they have to juggle, and they really need to have blocked out outbound time. But if you have two SDRs, one of them should be, as much as if it's humanly possible, should be dedicated to outbound, if you're doing outbound, of course. And the other would do the inbound. Outbound compensation, let's just touch on that. There's four kind of components. Where they're based, they want to get enough money so they can pay their basic bills. And then variable comp would be primarily tied to two things: the number of sales accepted opportunities, right? And these have been audited, that they generate per month, or sometimes per quarter if you're doing really enterprisey stuff. Also, a percentage of revenue of the deals they bring in, that they source. And the thing that most people miss, so first, the revenue is important because it gives them completion. Like some people say, well, the prospectors don't affect the deal. Like, well, yeah, they do, because the prospectors should be targeting the companies that have the higher likelihood of closing and for bigger deal sizes. So they for sure affect revenue coming in from outbound completely. Then minimum deal size. Okay, the problem is if you don't have a minimum deal size, and for everyone it's a bit different. Like if your average deal size is 50,000 euros, then you might need a minimum of 10,000. If your average deal size is 5,000 euros, maybe your minimum is 2,000, because you want to do bigger deals through outbound. This is really for outbound. But what happens is if you don't have a minimum deal size, then prospectors, of course, go for the easier deals to get opportunities at, and they tend to be pretty small, and you're just not going to make money at it. So you need to set some kind of minimum in order to focus those prospectors on the bigger deals at companies that are likely to buy. That's where you make more money, not through more deals, but fewer, bigger, better deals. Let's talk about AE, outbound SDR relationship. Now just keep in mind, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So just keep that in your pocket here. Now, I think the outbound SDRs, you got to remind everybody, including them and salespeople, they're not here to be executive assistants to the salespeople, to blindly follow their direction, be managed by the salespeople, or do all their outreach. No, no, no. Okay. The salespeople still need to prospect. But what the SDRs are here to do, treat the salespeople as a customer. AE means account executive, salesperson. Do most of their outreach and be experts in outreach and often teach the salespeople, because most salespeople don't know how to do it well. And they need to rely on the SDRs, the outbound SDRs, to know how to prospect most effectively. Okay. Now, the SDRs also help ensure that the prospects that they've found don't get dropped or forgotten, and the information in your sales systems are accurate. Right? Usually, salespeople, it depends on the company, often are not as reliable for many reasons, many valid reasons, to keep their CRM or sales system information accurate. But SDRs should be very good at that. And if they're working with salespeople, they can really help that salesperson keep their pipelines cleaner. So again, the outbound SDRs need to be prepared to take leadership with the salespeople in how to generate outbound pipeline. What you don't want to do is to have a new outbound SDR work with a new AE. At least one of them needs to know what they're doing. Senior AE with a new SDR or vice versa. But the SDR is often going to tell the AE what to do once they know what they're doing. And simple things like having regular calls so they can figure out how to divide and conquer a list, who does what. Also, if you're in a bigger team where this SDRs even introduce themselves to the sales managers, so the managers know what's going on and can best support them. Sometimes the managers have to kind of coach and encourage the salespeople as well. And then how do you, for this, the SDR, if they're supporting 4 salespeople, how do they divide their energy, their focus, their time across those 4 salespeople to balance it? If it's 1 salesperson, it's easy. If it's 2, right? But they need to, so some prospectors spend like a day a week per salesperson. There's really no answer. Kind of depends on that situation. But the organization really is the #1 skill for prospectors, outbound SDRs, to be successful. So organization means focus in this case. And realize sometimes you get a dud. A salesperson who's just not going to be a good partner, not going to work. What can you say? It just happens. Best thing to do is kind of ignore them and focus on your other salespeople that are more willing and able to work with the SDR and to get some results with them. Right. And such an account-based outbound. So, I think a lot of people take this idea of account-based marketing, account-based selling, blah, 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 as only for big companies. It's really not. It's really more of a principle. So unless you're targeting like really small companies with like 1 person or, 1 decision maker that's the only person on the list, you really want to think about you're targeting companies, not people. All right. So this is really taking a longer term view of your market. What is our market? How do we divide it up? Who are the companies we want to target? Who are the ideal companies that we want to really focus on? And how do we differentiate them from the ones who aren't a good fit? How can we, in theory, build the whole list of all our targets and then divide them up into chunks to tackle them chunk by chunk? Right? So they can work that list methodically, the list of companies, of which there are people at the companies, but work in the companies. So let's say they're mapping and working each account methodically, right? How do we, because so many salespeople just go over the same accounts over and over again. They just kind of spin their wheels. Think about it like in a crime show, or if you're an archaeology dig, right? They lay out all the squares and then they work each square. That way they know exactly what they've done, what they haven't done, and they're not duplicating effort. And this is what you want to do with account-based outbound, which is so rare. People do not do this enough. So part of that is dividing up territories or segments. All right, so this kind of these chunks, like you want to divide and conquer this. Now territories implies geographic territory. That's fine. Sometimes territories are defined by industry, by size. There's really no limit to how you divide and conquer your market. But you do need some form some form of territory system. So I am not a fan of round robin and pooling, except in special situations. Again, if you're very transactional, like small business consumer type models, that's maybe more of a fit. The more you get into B2B, and then the more you really want to avoid round robin and pooling. So you need territories, who owns what. Again, you can divide it up any way you want. It's just whatever makes sense. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's worse to not have territories in some way. And it's even worse, like managing territories, like territory management can be horrendous, but it's worse to not have them. And again, I mentioned that outbound prospectors, so you divide the territories up, the salespeople get whatever they get, and the outbound prospectors who work with salespeople just pick up the territories of the salespeople they're partnered with. And it's usually 1 to 4 salespeople, with rare exceptions. One other thing, it's probably uncommon. I don't know if anyone has a team with sales managers that have more than 10 reports. There might be a few of you here, but in case you do, that's too many. You don't want more than 8 to 10 reports per manager, and maybe even less if you're in a time of a lot of change and rebuilding, rejiggering, maybe 6. So what I would say is, if you have an outbound team or sales team and you're trying to scale, the biggest problem is having enough frontline managers that are any good. So it needs to be important for you to think about before you scale how you can have enough good managers. Anyway, some ways to create more management capacity are things like team leads, dividing teams into sub-teams, giving people side projects. So if I'm a sales manager and I've got, at Salesforce.com, I had 15 people. So I divided that group into 3 sub-teams of 5. Each team picked their own team captain, who actually didn't get extra compensation, but it was a chance for them to show some leadership potential and to learn something. And each team captain would do things like train new people, do like the basic training of new hires, right? The stuff that was really boring for me at that point. And people would often pick up side projects. It may be things that I needed to do, didn't want to do, that they wanted to do, or stuff that they came up with that they wanted to do. So this idea of 2 team meetings is also different. So often divide up. 1 team meeting is around like the metrics and benchmarks and like business. And a different team meeting is really kind of a learning opportunity. How can the team teach each other things, learn together, maybe bring in experts, and dividing things up. And also the sales manager, and then again, there's a case study in the From Impossible to Inevitable book on a guy named Lou Signia, who made his team salespeople more of a self-managing team, right? It really takes a lot of the burden off, and you get a better result because the team is more engaged as well. So, bit of a discussion here, and then we'll have time for Q&A. If you have outbound sales development, or if you want to build it, right? What are you doing well, but what are you, after this thing, what are some things you feel like you're not doing or should be doing? What are some changes you need to make? And really, where are you going to begin, right? Step 1. The number 1 is you need to have someone dedicated to it for the magic to start. If you've got 2 people and they're inbound and they're both doing inbound and outbound, how can you get at least 1 person dedicated to outbound, whether you have to hire, beg, borrow, or steal? That's where things really start changing. Now, there's one topic I didn't put in here as we get to wrap up. So I'm going to see here in the end first and then go back to it. But the topic I didn't put in is, and then there's other people today, I'm sure, who can do things like virtual management, but a lot of people are isolated at home. A lot of salespeople are isolated at home. And it's a real challenge, a mental health challenge, like a social challenge. So anything you can do to help them feel more connection to themselves, their families, to each other will help. And something we've done at Predictable Revenue is I've started in my own company. I put out an email saying, hey, we're going to do these unique genius calls. And really what it is, it's a call. It's once a week. So these office hours, and anyone who wants to show up, it's optional, can show up and to help bring a project of yours, because everyone has these projects and ideas that have been on the shelf for a while. And how do you take any project, personal, professional? It could be a sales book, it could be painting. And people want to paint, do poetry, write a sales book, do music, whatever it is. And we're going to share it with the group, what you're doing, what's stuck, what's next for you. And then next week, you're going to take a step to make some progress on that. You're going to tell the group you're committing to take a step with that project. And it's been amazing to see people just like this safe place where people really are sharing personal things and then getting comfort and validation that they've got something of value, because everyone does. All of you have something of value. And to take that and to make progress with it. And there's been this incredible like reinvigoration of a lot of people who have been struggling with this the whole pandemic issue and lockdown issue. Not even with work. It's often just like the whole environment of being isolated. But what we did see too is a resurgence in the kind of the energy and effectiveness of people on the sales team. We had a head of training who said, he's like, wow, yeah, the team really started to pull it together the last few weeks. And now it's not an accident. So anything you can do there to help your team reconnect with each other and stay connected, which doesn't mean just talking. I think I don't have a guide yet, but I'm working on a Unique Genius book. But I think it's really essential to keep people motivated and connected so they can actually have a chance to perform in sales jobs or whatever job they have. So as to wrap up, what are some of the changes, plans, and key takeaways that you've got from this, right? And this is, okay, yeah, you can make a long list, but what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things really that are going to be the most important? I mentioned if you've got SDRs, the number one is if they're doing inbound and out, how can you get someone who's just doing outbound? That's number one. What's the number one thing that you feel like is the thing to start with first? What step can you take with that even today or tomorrow within 24 hours to get the ball rolling? Maybe it's setting a calendar invite or scheduling a meeting with someone key on your team to talk about it. All right, we got some time for discussion. And so we've got the chat. Let's see here if this is going to work. All right. So we've got the chat here in the session section. Let's see, we've got about 250 people on still. And I'm going to just check the event to see if people, there we go. There's some people commented in the event. Hannah said, hey, is it better to set weekly or monthly goals? Definitely you want at least weekly goals. You want both. All right, so usually there's some sort of, in a sales world, weekly goals might look like calls and emails and things, and monthly goals might look more like results, like opportunities or deals. So you have both in balance. All right, Jaka, if I pronounce that correctly, Jaka. Sorry, that was a different session. So I don't know if someone else has a sense of creativity. Okay, I think that was the only one from there. Any other comments or questions? Especially now, whether you are in a big company or at a smaller one. Yep, and I'm not going to pronounce your name, Sasau. I'm sure that's incorrect. So they love the part doing the sales first yourself. Right? It's so essential. So. By the way, I would really highly recommend that this From Impossible book, but I'll put I put my LinkedIn, put in here, my profile, because the last thing I posted really this morning was that sales mistakes set of slides, if you want to see that. And you can use my email to connect with me on there. So it seems like we got a good session. We'll wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. If there's any last comments or questions, you can throw them in here. Otherwise, what I'll leave you with is, again, this idea of, there really has never been a better time to recreate yourself or your team here. Everyone's adapting. It's just the very beginning. So for me, I found it very, not powerful. I mean, I do simple things like get up in the morning and go for a walk outside every morning. I get great ideas. It's beautiful outside. You have a big family. Like little things like that can make a difference if you're feeling stressed at work, or if you just want some brain space, if you're feeling kind of like compressed at home. I do simple drawing. I pull up these Art Hub for Kids videos on YouTube, and I've just been having fun drawing, like kind of doing things that I like to do for no other reason than I just kind of feel like I want to do them. I've been interested in composting, drawing, writing, and I don't know where they'll go, But what I can tell you is that all these little whispers that we hear about, like these interests that we often ignore, are important. And if you can practice listening to them, that intuition, and it really leads to a lot, whether it's like ideas or fulfillment or better team bonding and building. And one more thing, you're going to be okay. Another our blog post I wrote called "You're Going to Be Okay," because I know it's such a hard time for so many people around the world. Like there's never been more fear, uncertainty, or doubt. In this article, it's just a reminder that businesses will go. There are many businesses will go bankrupt. Jobs will be lost, but if you can keep going, you're going to be okay. If you can embrace the shit and not run from it or hide from it, and because it's a difficult time, you're going to be in a better place once this blows over, once the recession is through. And again, this could be a year or two out. Like no one knows. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone who is here in the questions and comments. Really privileged to get to share some of these ideas with you. Have a great time at the rest of the Podim event. And thank you, Nina, for helping organize this and getting me on here correctly.